Hello and welcome to Navigating PCI Compliance, Leveraging Deep Observability. Today's webinar is sponsored by Gigamon and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in that questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to case studies, white papers, and blogs for you there in that handout section from Gigamon. Just a ton of great resources. Go ahead and download those now because these things end faster than you might expect, and then you've forgotten to grab the resources. So feel free to grab them now. Share them with your friends and colleagues if they're appropriate. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic session. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Stephen Gaudreau, who's Cloud Security Evangelist at Gigamon, and we've got John Coyle, Regional Sales Manager at Gigamon. So now I'm going to turn things over to Stephen to get us started.
Hello, my name is Stephen Gaudreau. I'm the Cloud Security Evangelist here at Gigamon, and we're going to discuss navigating PCI compliance, leveraging a lot of telemetry you already have on your network. I also want to introduce John Coyle. John?
Hi, my name is John Coyle. I'm a Regional Sales Director based in the Southeast.
So PCI compliance is going to be the focus of this discussion. However, there is always a technology aspect to that. And I want to kind of set the foundations for understanding how we go about solving these problems before we talk about what we solve for. And I feel that's foundational and fairly different to a lot of other solutions out there. So Gigamon is first and foremost a network telemetry solution with packet broker features. I know that's very tactical, but one of the reasons I want to talk about that is this is kind of the setup of most classic networks, including cloud, where you span multiple different administrative and technology domains, and visibility, unifying visibility through those can be a bit challenging. Now, what Gigamon can do with its pedigree of having network packet broker features is we have a broad lateral footprint within organizations and within the public and private cloud. Now, why that's important is you can't see where you don't sit. Now, we have some of the classic features where we can mirror and duplicate various kinds of traffic to various kinds of tools for whatever the need, but we've also added deep packet inspection to what we do. Now, we're not looking for threats or attacks, which is a classic use case for deep packet inspection. We're simply looking for standard applications and protocols. And combine that with where we sit in the network, where we can broadly tap layer 2 through 7 domains on-prem and in the cloud. That gives us a very unique lateral footprint. Now, with all that visibility, it can be a bit overwhelming. So what we've started to do is map it to some of the security and compliance frameworks. So one of the very unique use cases that we can solve for with the deep packet inspection is we can broadly see applications and protocols in flight, in motion on the network, including a non-standard port use case. Now, these are applications and protocols that are not running the RFC classic configuration. These are completely valid configurations. However, many classic tools and classic logging is really, really blind to that. And this can be so pervasive that the MITRE attack has set up its own sub-technique dedicated to this particular use case. And this is very important because this is a very broad problem in the industry as a whole that we can help solve. Now, before we dig into PCI, a little bit more foundational work is in your network logs that are feeding your SIMs, you have these the 5-tuple information, right? The source port, IP, destination port IP, and then what protocol, typically UDP or TCP. And whenever there's a problem, people go to the logs. Now, that's not where the problem was, but that's maybe where the indicator of a problem could be derived. Now, NetFlow came along and added a few more things. The ingress interface, maybe, on the network, and the flow start time and the bytes or the length of the conversation. Well, Gigamon, with that broad network telemetry, can see so much more. We can see MAC addresses and DHCP options and protocol information, encryption levels, certificate information, and of course, various application visibility and detection. These are all things we can feed your SIM for PCI compliance. Now, PCI 4.0, it's a payment standard that a lot of banks have are enforcing that. And the basic plan was to protect or specify a set of special data. That special data is, in this case, credit card information. That special data needs to be protected. You need to know who is talking to it. Are they allowed to talk to it? Should they be talking to it? And you need to make sure that nothing outside of that can talk to those special systems. Now, sounds easy, right? And honestly, it's good, just good digital hygiene, which we're going to cover as we go through some of this. I like to think of PCI as a mini zero trust. It specifies a set of special protected data you have to protect. Well, zero trust is, you just have to do it to everything. So let's examine some particular solutions here. So in PCI 4.0, I read through all 350 pages, so you don't have to, but some of the things it calls for is monitoring IoT. Well, IoT would be probably your payment card or point of sale systems, right? They're often minimally viable compute. You often don't have a lot of configuration. And if you're in a dynamic environment with a lot of mergers or acquisitions, then you may have things come and go that you just can't see. So we're able to see that from the bottom up when they come online, when we see their MAC address, we know they're out there. And of course, you can't protect or you can't make compliant what you can't see. Now, there's a lot of top-down solutions that can help with that, and those are all perfectly valid and viable, but you also need a bottom-up solution. And when I mean bottom-up, I mean the technology stack, the OSI layer from the bottom up. There's a lot of good information there if you know where to look or how to squeeze that. Other things we can see, make sure you have appropriate encryption levels, look at the levels of TLS in use. The non-standard port use case is featured in PCI. And then we also create a form of unified logging across these IoT devices and enterprise, because not all logs have the same information. And we're starting to see that in the industry, in the security industry as a whole, come together where they're starting to specify logs should contain these X number of entries. And, with IoT or other devices, that's not necessarily the case. Now, Gigamon can satisfy 25 PCI risk controls. And we do that by just looking at traffic come and go. We observe the traffic as it passes by. We don't take part in the traffic. Now, that's a really big distinction there because we don't have to sit in line. We've got these taps where we can mirror and duplicate the traffic and then inspect it for any kind of unknown application protocol or a new device or rogue compute that came online. So that allows us for a number of things. We can spot various gaps in the encryption. We can make sure certain networks don't talk to others. And then reporting, surprisingly, is an area that we can help with in PCI because we see this data and we feed it to these tools. We help speed reporting because we have a lot of that information in one centralized location. Now, we have a white paper in the link down below and the customer testimonial for pay, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. So for PCI, there are 12 or major controls, R1 through R12. I have taken this particular screen grab off of the Splunk documentation and I've expanded it. Everything with an orange dot is something we help enable. Everything without an orange dot is a search that in this case, Splunk already has. Now, conceptually, we can feed any data sim, any sort of environment that you have, whatever existing tools are. We probably have an integration with them. And those orange dots are things that we can help solve for just broadly across the board. And some of those, create external logging is a specific requirement that we can help with. There's looking at network time protocol traffic. DNS traffic is very important. And then unencrypted protocols, such as FTP. Now, on the reporting side of things, we can see certificates and encryption come and go. PCI mandates that you have an inventory of certificates, and that can be quite challenging in an IoT environment or a very diverse environment. But if we're recording this information, we could just run a report for what we've seen for the last 12 months. And while that probably won't be 100% of what you need, it should get you 80% of the way for that reporting requirement. So here's an example of some of the things that we can help enrich. In this case, again, we're using a Splunk dashboard, but we can feed many tools. And one of the things here I want to point out at the bottom is we're able to tie applications to network flows. And that's hugely important for a visibility and compliance point of view. Not only can I see that I have some things talking with TLS 1.0, which is expressly forbidden in PCI, but I can also tell you what the application was and what the encryption type was, because PCI does make exceptions if you can't remediate some of these applications. You do, however, have to microsegment them off and then run periodic reports proving that they are still protected and segmented off until the time comes that you can remediate or get rid of some of those lesser desirable configurations or security encryption. So PCI also wants you to roughly have an inventory of all applications on your PCI compliant network. Actually, it says you should know them all. However, that's easier said than done. There are many solutions that are top-down, agent-based. Now, what that doesn't solve for is rogue compute and IoT. So, if you have a printer on your PCI network, you need to make sure no one else can print to it. You also need to observe its behavior, make sure it's not doing anything it shouldn't be, because there is lack of visibility in that. And again, those point of sale machines are often minimally viable compute, right? Running a fixed OS that may or may not be updated. And if it is updated, what did it break? And in this case, what we're seeing some peer-to-peer applications. So right away, I know that I've got some unknown or rogue compute on my PCI enabled network, which technically means I am not PCI compliant. So I need to track this down and find this. So for PCI, it basically says you should not have any unencrypted traffic. Well, here we have some unencrypted traffic. It specifically calls out you shouldn't have any older TLS or SSL versions. In this case, we have some SSL version 3.0 out there. Weak ciphers. There's some RC4. These are things that are negotiated that isn't always available from classic network telemetry, static key exchanges, right? And then expired certificates. PCI, no expired certificates, no self-signed certificates. Again, it's just good digital hygiene. However, you don't know if you don't look. Now, John's going to tell us a story in a little bit about when we went and deployed at a customer site and we found a 19-year-old certificate that had been missed or guess, 17 or 16 years. And again, it's just visibility. It wasn't, really a security risk, but it did show that there were gaps in visibility. And then, of course, you need to have an understanding of which certificates are going to expire in your network. You may not have control over this, but you still need to know, and you need to work towards it, right? So DNS is something that's specifically called out in a PCI and several other security frameworks, honestly. And what you want to look for here is just see, it should be a fairly static environment in an IoT network or in a point of sale network. You should have fairly static, routine, mundane requests. But if you start to see problems, one of those examples is non-existent domain. One of two things is about to happen. If you start seeing this number increment, you're either about to get the dreaded network is slow, or trouble ticket, network is slow or application is slow, trouble ticket, or you have a compromised workload that's trying to phone home to a domain that hasn't been registered yet through a DGA, a domain generated algorithm. And then, of course, any kind of errors here will manifest themselves as performance problems. Additionally, you should generally be able to record the DNS on your network. Now, this can be a challenge because it costs performance. But again, this is something Gigamon is uniquely situated to solve for with our network telemetry, because we watch the conversations come and go, right? Because we don't take part in them. So there's a lot here we can help aid and enable. Rogue DNS servers are also called out rogue services as a whole. You should have an understanding. In this case, that particular IP address, if I saw that, my first guess would be somebody brought in their home Linksys or Netgear router and had plugged it in at their desk. And these are some of the resolutions we're seeing. It's probably not a security risk. However, your systems shouldn't be using DNS servers outside of IT's control, because there are safeguards built into that. And if you're not using them, then you could potentially be bypassing those safeguards. And in this case, you would technically not be PCI compliant. You'd have to remediate this as quickly as you could. Something that's not explicitly called out on PCI, but is very, very important. In this case, it's mean time to resolution. PCI vendors processing credit card transactions often have an SLA or SLO. They have to be able to process that credit card transaction within a certain amount of time, usually a couple milliseconds or so. And if not, then they either have a fine or they lose the business for that particular transaction. And one of the things we discovered, or we knew with our telemetry system, is that we could detect performance problems in the network because we're observing the traffic externally. We're on taps, we're mirroring, duplicating the traffic. We can see if it's slow. We can see protocol level errors, and those are lost as you move up the tech stack. You just get the dreaded my app is slow, but we can see that there's network level problems, there's retransmits, there's some kind of long round trip time. And those are all things that we are uniquely situated to see, especially in hybrid environments where you have different administrative or technical domains where they all don't log to a central location. Those are things where if it goes out to the internet and comes back and it's slow, we're able to see that. We can differentiate between server latency and application latency. Server latency and network latency, right? If it takes a server a long time to respond, or if it took the traffic a long time to get there. We can also tie application visibility, again, to these slow round trip times. In this case, we have Modbus, which is an IoT device, appears to be having a long network round trip time. Now, looking at that IP address, there's a different Modbus device at a different IP, and it is congesting, right? It has high server latency. So we've got two problems here that initially may be difficult to troubleshoot from a classic network or logging perspective, that we can very quickly at a glance say one device is having a problem and the other one's having network latency, right? Because a lot of times when there's a trouble ticket, you find one problem and we're done. Well, problem continues and goes on. So I want to introduce John. He's going to talk a little bit about one of our customer use cases here where we helped them solve PCI with this network telemetry. Take it away, John.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So many of the things that Stephen covered today were gaps and and challenges for Corpay. Things like, the non-standard ports that he brought up, weak ciphers, expired certs, mean time to resolution. They didn't have answers for any of that. And so as part of their evaluation process with us, they discovered that the metadata coming from the network offered a lot of value into Splunk and some of their other observability tools where they use those tools to help monitor and receive alerts from their environment. Most of those alerts are coming from log data, and as everyone knows, that melt is really not enough. They needed that network telemetry into their observability platforms such as Dynatrace and Splunk, and we were the solution for that. So as we got into the discussions, they discovered that out of over 6,000 attributes that we provide for organizations to choose from, that we were able to help them build meaningful dashboards centered around PCI compliance. So a number of the dashboard images that you saw today actually were built for PCI compliance with Corpay. So at the end of the day, we really help them because they have a very dynamic environment. They're doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions constantly. They did not have a very good understanding of how their networks and their applications work together. And we were actually able to help them immensely provide answers to a lot of the questions that they couldn't get answered. So I'll turn it back over to you, Stephen. But in a nutshell, we provided a lot of value for a Fortune 100 company that was struggling and losing a lot of revenue to their competitors.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so we have broad lateral visibility, and we started pivoting into compliance, and PCI has been a use case that we've been doing very well with. And our visibility is our telemetry is so powerful and broad that it can be a bit overwhelming. So we're starting to narrow it through or view it through these lenses of compliance to make it more understandable and digestible. If you're someone who's trying to implement PCI compliance, one of my big takeaways, I've been out of the field for a while because I'm a former network engineer, former InfoSec person. Various groups only know their little bit or piece of it. They don't always understand the full big picture. And using compliance is a way to help quantify the risk and then put a plan in place on how to start tackling these challenges, especially for groups that don't understand, the whole big picture of the problem you're trying to solve. And PCI, again, is just good digital hygiene. And we're going to be doing some similar things to some other compliance frameworks. So, if you want to contact us, please scan this, or you can reach out to me or John directly. I will talk compliance all day. I know it's a very, very exciting topic, but I'm an old school packet nerd, and I know some of the telemetry that can be squeezed out of the data, and I know that it can solve a lot of problems if we spend some time to do the mappings to the compliance framework, and we can definitely make your lives easier around the telemetry, the visibility, and the performance aspect of it. There's still a lot of other solutions out there that you're going to need that solve for other problems, but we are uniquely situated to help solve for this one. So I want to thank you for attending this session. And like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Yeah, really interesting presentation so far, and we've got some more coming up here in the Q&A. John, are you ready for some questions?
I am.
All right, great.
Sure, Scott.
We've got a first one here. They're asking, how are your customers getting the information that was presented today to become compliant?
How are they getting the information to become compliant?
Yeah, I think they're wondering, like, at least my interpretation is, like with the rogue printers, the unencrypted traffic, the expired certificates, things like that. How does Gigamon discover those things and help them become
Well,
compliant?
sure. So basically, we're extracting metadata from the packets coming off the network. That could be any environment. That could be virtual, physical, VMware, ESXi, containers, Kubernetes, AWS. We're aggregating all that traffic into one central point, and then we enrich that telemetry. We do some filtering and some other things to optimize it and enrich that traffic. And then we send that in the form of metadata into observability tools such as a Splunk, a Dynatrace, could be a Datadog, could be a whole array of different observability platforms. Does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, I think so. And if thanks for that question. If that doesn't answer it, just go ahead and drop a note there in the chat, and we'll follow up there. Next one here, they're wondering what are Gigamon's customers today doing to fortify their PCI environments?
So that's a good question. This is actually the first use case around PCI that was brought to us in terms of producing or building a dashboard for this specific use case. At the time, we didn't even know that we could do this. The customer brought us in to solve some other use cases, and then they asked us, what can you do for PCI 4.0? We're looking to fortify and put better guardrails around that environment. A lot of it had to do with the fact that they were not able to become compliant from a network perspective. So there's 12 requirements that Stephen covered earlier in the presentation. And they had no way of getting the answers to those 12 requirements. Most of the observability tools out there today focus on log data, and they don't get the full picture. And so PCI obviously runs on a network, and we can provide that in the form of metadata into those observability tools, because observability tools cannot ingest packets, as probably everybody knows.
Right.
So that was the fact that we have the attributes to build the dashboard around those 12 requirements to answer those questions. The other thing it did for Corpay is it actually helped them speed up their audit times from weeks to actually days and hours, because we provide all those answers in real time through that dashboard capture.
Nice. Okay, great. Hey, next question here come in. They're wondering, how long does a PCI audit take?
Well, that's a good question. I think that varies. It really does. It'd be hard to really pinpoint that, but they can take, from what I understand, and through Stephen, who's more of an expert in that area, it can take weeks, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, to run through an audit on PCI from the network perspective.
Okay. There's a question here from the audience as well. Somebody's asking, are security validation methods like MFA in Zero Trust sort of part of the PCI compliance picture, or are those mostly for other things?
That would be, I don't know the exact answer to that question. I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say Zero Trust probably definitely plays into that, but I wouldn't know on the MFA side of it.
Okay.
You talk about factor authentication.
Yeah, we'll give that question to you guys, and you can send it around the teams and send it back. Great, thanks for the question. It looks like that's about it for the questions. I think we're going to leave it there. John, if somebody wants to get started with Gigamon or find out more, anything that you would recommend?
Well, yeah, you can start with our website, right? www.gigamon.com. Feel free to, if you didn't get a chance to scan that QR code, please, maybe Steve, maybe Scott, you can put that back up on the screen there, but that's another good way to get information. But if you can't, the website, I would say just go to the website, ask to speak with somebody, contact us, and they'll put you in touch with your local sales rep and sales engineer.
Okay. Okay. Super. Yeah. And I don't think I can bring up that QR code, but I do have, we do have the handout section, which also has that Corpay case study that you guys were both talking about, the PCI compliance white paper that Stephen mentioned, and then there's a PCI compliance blog link on there. John, I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing the presentation and being on for the Q&A. Thanks for your time and for your insights here. Really appreciate it.
Sure, Scott. My pleasure.
All right. Well, I'm going to let John go, and we do have just a couple more things to do here before we wrap up. One of those, we've got a poll for you to find out about what additional information you'd like to have about the Gigamon solution. So you can just click off on any of these items. There's, data sheet, technical white paper, customer case study, pricing details, personal demo. If you'd like to try it for yourself, of course, if you're already a customer, that's interesting too. You can click on as many of those as you'd like. And we'll leave that up for a minute here, so you can click on all the resources that you'd like to get. And again, there are a couple there in the handout section that you can grab. Okay, and while you're all filling out that poll, I'd also like to announce the winner of the Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Riya Gupta from Massachusetts. So congratulations to Riya Gupta. We'll be in touch to get you your card. All right. Well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Gigamon for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.